War is horrible and all that, but sometimes it can actually be downright funny. Hey, Cypher here. It's been a while since I've done a wars you've never heard of, so I figured I'd do one on the funny wars. America's small wars is somewhat of a passion of mine, as I've said before, and since America is so ready to go to war at pretty much any point in her history, some pretty funny incidents have happened. Sometimes they're beginnings of pretty bad conflicts, or other times they're just simple misunderstandings that are pretty bloodless. So here's the rundown of the top 10 funniest wars in American history. There was an entire war fought over somebody's ear, and the war is called the War of Jenkin's Ear, which is a war between England and Spain in the 17th century. Now there are a lot of reasons for this war, but the reason that the English Parliament gave was because an English merchant captain by the name of Jenkins had his ear cut off under the suspicion of smuggling by the Spanish, though he wasn't actually smuggling at the time. He spread this story, carrying around his ear like a trophy, and even testifying in front of Parliament and the Prime Minister. England used the story to declare war on Spain, and all of it over some guy's ear. And most of the war was fought in the Americas. In 1791, there was a whiskey tax passed into federal law, and people heavily resisted it. There was a huge rebellion in Pennsylvania, so much so that George Washington, the president at the time, rode out in front of an army to go and squash it. Problem was, nobody stuck around for George Washington to fight. It was the only time a sitting president commanded an army in the field, and it was completely pointless. I've already talked about the Nuku Hiva campaign in another episode, so I'll put a link up. But suffice it to say, a naval captain just randomly decided to annex an island, and then he sailed away, and nobody did anything about it. In 1839, Iowa and Missouri sent troops to their borders in a border dispute. They mostly sat in different camps, just staring at each other. In fact, the only person who was really harmed during this conflict was a tax collector who was captured and put in jail. Because honey was a special commodity in the region, 3 beehives got chopped down during this. Nothing really happened, but it's a hilarious explanation of what is now called the Honey War. In 1842, Commodore Jones was sailing a fleet in the Pacific. He mistakenly thought the US had declared war on Mexico, so he went and parked his fleet in Monterey Bay. The town surrendered immediately. Since Monterey was the current capital of Alta, California, Commodore Jones had accidentally taken over California. 4 years before the Mexican-American War, the US had captured California in 1 day, and totally by mistake. Oops. Jones apologized and sailed away. William Walker and his gang of filibusters kept on trying to take over Latin American countries in the 1850s. Seriously, these guys were just civilians doing their own thing. These idiots took over a couple of Mexican states for a couple of months, but were pushed back into America. So instead, they focused on Nicaragua, which the filibusters captured in 1858. After a couple years of consolidation and ruling the country, they started trying to take over other countries surrounding Nicaragua, but they were rebuffed. Walker was actually executed in Honduras a couple of years later. In 1856, a Vigilance Committee was formed in San Francisco. The local militia, led by none other than General Sherman and the US Navy, were called in to stop the committee, but they sat around bickering the whole time. The committee hung 4 people, stole a shipment of arms, and generally acted like they owned the place. In 1859, the US and the British Empire sent troops to some islands that were in between Bellingham, Washington, and Victoria, which is now in Canada. The problem they were going to fight over was that some pigs had crossed a border and got shot. So the two sides puffed up their chests, and the US sent the largest force. Therefore, we got the islands that were disputed. Not a shot was fired in what is now called the Pig War. There were a whole series of wars fought in the late 19th century by ranchers over who controlled what territory. In the case of the Johnson County War, it actually got so bad that the US cavalry had to be called in. I mean, really, all of that over how much land you have for your cattle grazing? Really? In 1904, a family of people who had once visited the United States were captured by a group of bandits in Morocco. Teddy Roosevelt got all kinds of angry and decided to liberate the heck out of that place with the US Navy. He used his big stick policy for some tourists who weren't even Americans. If you've seen The Wind and the Lion, it's kinda depicting this, but it's totally wrong. See? War can be funny. You just have to know where to look.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and check out some previous episodes while you're at it. I'll see you next time.